So, in 1990, this sweeping piece of legislation was passed to fix a pretty glaring disability employment gap.
Right, the ADA.
Yeah, the Americans with Disabilities Act.
AA?
And for 30 years, billions were spent, court battles were fought, and yet the numbers just barely budged.
It was incredibly stagnant.
But then a global pandemic sent everyone home. And almost overnight, a massive chunk of that 30-year-old problem basically fixed itself.
It's wild.
It really is. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're unpacking an accidental experiment. We are pulling insights from this fascinating academic article by Jonathan H. Westover, Ph.D.
Titled Bridging the Gap, Remote Work and Disability Inclusion, right?
Exactly. And the mission of this deep dive is to explore how that massive shift to remote work during the COVID-19 pandemic inadvertently achieved what decades of policy and legislation just could not do.
Which was drastically closing that disability employment gap.
Yeah, and if you are listening right now, maybe you're managing a distributed team or navigating those tricky back-to-office mandates.
Or maybe you just want to understand the mechanics of a fairer workplace.
Right. This deep dive is going to arm you with the surprising data on why flexibility is the ultimate inclusion tool. Okay, let's unpack this.
We need to start with the baseline, right?
Yeah, we have to establish just how stagnant this labor market was before the world shut down in 2020.
Well, the baseline was this stubborn, basically immovable 45 percentage point chasm.
Which is just a huge gap.
Massive. Right up until 2020, employment for individuals without disabilities sat comfortably around 77%. But for those with disabilities, it languished at 32%.
Only 32%. Wow.
Yeah, and that specific gap is actually wider than the employment disparities we usually see across gender, race, age, or education levels.
It was essentially the elephant in the room of all those corporate diversity initiatives.
Absolutely. And it wasn't a secret. The ADA in 1990 promised to fix this.
Right. It was supposed to be this definitive legal hammer to shatter the gap. But clearly, the legislation often fell short.
It did. Some research even showed it might have had a negative net effect initially.
Wait, a negative effect? How does the civil rights law decrease employment?
Well, because employers fear the costs, they were terrified of the legalities of accommodations. It operated on this framework of reasonable accommodations, but employers could claim undue hardship.
So they could just say, like, hey, modifying this physical workspace is too expensive and get off the hook.
Exactly. And before the pandemic, asking for remote work was heavily stigmatized.
Right. It was seen as a perk, not a necessity.
Only 7% of workdays were remote pre-2020. So employers would routinely deny work-from-home requests for disabled employees, usually citing productivity concerns.
They just couldn't imagine managing someone they couldn't physically see at a desk.
Right. But then, post-pandemic, remote workdays quadrupled to 28%.
And the result was huge. Employment for workers with physical disabilities shot up by 14%.
Which is just an unprecedented surge. It breaks all the historical patterns.
Because usually, disability employment lags during and after recessions, right?
Yeah.
They're usually the first out and the last back in.
Exactly. But this time, it surged. And it was a global phenomenon. There was a 10% average increase in countries like the US, Canada, France, and Australia.
But there was an outlier, right? The UK.
Yeah, the UK missed the wave.
Why is that?
Well, their government had these extensive furlough programs, so they basically subsidized companies to keep workers on payroll while they sat idle, which essentially froze the labor market.
So they didn't have that dynamic forced shift to remote operations.
Exactly. They delayed the remote work revolution.
Thinking about this whole situation, it really reminds me of trying to fix an old plumbing system.
How so?
Well, like the ADA was an attempt to patch this leaky, outdated plumbing with these super expensive custom parts. You've got HR and lawyers trying to tape up the leaks.
Right, but the pipes themselves are just rotten.
Exactly. The traditional office was broken. And then remote work comes along, and instead of trying to patch the old pipes, it's like entirely bypassing them and building a brand new, frictionless aqueduct.
That is a brilliant way to look at it.
But I do have to ask, how could businesses have been so stubbornly wrong about remote productivity for so long? Were they just blindly stubborn?
Well, the data shows that structural barriers are often just organizational assumptions. They aren't actual operational necessities.
So they just assumed people wouldn't work if they were at home.
Pretty much. And when the pandemic forced them to actually measure output rather than desk time, they realized they were completely wrong.
Which perfectly transitions us to the why. Having established this massive jump in the numbers, What exactly is it about a laptop and a Wi-Fi connection that changes the game so drastically?
Well, the remote work flexibility explains a staggering 68 to 85% of that post-pandemic increase in full-time disability employment.
That is a huge chunk. So it wasn't just employers suddenly deciding to be more inclusive.
No, not at all. It's a supply-side revolution.
A supply-side revolution, meaning the talent was always there, just waiting.
Exactly. And to understand why they couldn't supply their labor before, we have to look at the commute.
Ah, the commute.
Yeah, here is a jaw-dropping stat from the research. For workers with physical impairments who can work remotely, their labor force participation is 90%.
Wait, really? 90%.
Yes, 90%. But if they cannot work remotely, if the role strictly requires them to be in an office, that number plummets to 20%.
Oh, wow. So the commute itself is literally the ultimate barrier.
It really is.
You rarely think about the physical energy a commute drains out of you until you just don't have to do it anymore.
Right, for most people, it's just an annoyance.
Yeah, exactly. But for someone with a disability, dealing with an inaccessible train or unpredictable weather, it's exhausting before the workday even starts. It's like traditional office work for someone with a disability is like playing a video game on hard mode.
Oh, I like that comparison.
Right, but half the buttons on your controller are broken. You absolutely have the skills to beat the game, but the interface refuses to let you play.
Yeah.
And remote work finally lets them switch to, like, custom difficulty, where they can actually utilize their skills.
That interface metaphor is so accurate because remote work fundamentally allows for environmental control.
Environmental control, like lighting and stuff.
Exactly. Home spaces allow for customized lighting, specialized acoustics, and bathroom accessibility. And you get all of that without the need for expensive office retrofits.
Because the employee is controlling their own space.
Right. And then you add in schedule flexibility, which is crucial for managing chronic conditions or fatigue or just medical appointments.
They don't have to burn through all their sick leave just to maintain baseline health.
Precisely. And there's one more really fascinating mechanism here, reduced discrimination.
Oh, how so? Because they aren't seen in person.
Yeah. Video screens and written chats, like Slack, reduce the visual salience of some disabilities. It fundamentally changes how individuals are perceived in the hiring process and in daily interactions.
Because the focus just shifts completely to the output and the work itself.
Exactly. The bias is stripped away.
Okay, so if the workers are benefiting this much, we have to ask the obvious question. What is the actual bottom line impact on the organizations employing them?
Well, the organizations win big, too. First, they get access to a massive, underutilized talent pool.
Which is pretty crucial during all these current labor shortages.
Right. And second, their accommodation costs just plummet. The financial burden shifts from retrofitting commercial real estate to basically just equipping a home office.
Just sending out a laptop and a monitor?
Yeah. And then there's retention. Flexibility results in 33% lower attrition rates.
33% is massive.
It is. But crucially, workers who acquire a disability while they are already employed are 11% more likely to keep their jobs now than before the pandemic.
Oh, wow. Because historically, acquiring a disability often meant you had to leave the workforce entirely.
Right.
Right.
Exactly. The old system was just too rigid to adapt to a sudden change in someone's physical reality.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. When I was looking through the data in Westover's article, I noticed this weird anomaly.
The wage drop.
Yes. In occupations where remote work expanded greatly, wages for workers with disabilities actually fell by 1.4%. But non-disabled workers saw a 2.5% increase.
It sounds counterintuitive, I know.
It does. Wait, wages went down. That sounds like a bad thing. Like, are companies just exploiting them? Why is this actually a sign of a labor market success story?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the slight wage drop actually proves a massive influx of new labor supply.
Okay, unpack that for me.
So because those physical barriers were removed, so many previously sidelined people rushed into the workforce all at once.
Ah, so it's a supply and demand thing.
Exactly. This massive influx eased wage pressures for employers. So employers got great talent without having to drastically inflate wages to bid for a limited local pool.
And thousands of people who are locked out of the system are now earning full-time salary.
Right. It makes it a win-win economic scenario. The pie gets way bigger, even if the individual slice adjusts slightly.
That makes total sense. So, knowing all these undeniable benefits for both sides, how are the world's leading companies actually putting this into practice without recreating the old stigmas.
Well, the key is shifting away from special accommodations and moving toward universal design.
Universal design, meaning you design the job to be accessible for everyone from the start.
Exactly. Instead of forcing employees to bravely come forward, provide doctor's notes, and basically beg HR for an accommodation, leading companies make it the baseline.
Like Microsoft's and American Express, right? I read about the Amex Flex program.
Yes, Amex Flex makes remote work and schedule flexibility the standard for everyone. It totally removes the stigma and the burden of disclosure.
Because if everyone has flexibility, working from home no longer signals a vulnerability.
Precisely. And we see smart hybrid models doing this too, like Salesforce.
Right, they use role-based hybrid models.
Yeah, rather than relying on a specific manager's personal preference for seeing faces in an office, they base the flexibility on the actual requirements of the role. It ensures fairness.
But even with universal design, we still have physical offices. Hybrid meetings are a reality.
Which can create a very unequal dynamic.
Exactly. So how do you prevent the remote folks from becoming second-class citizens? I noticed Shopify had a really interesting approach to this.
Their digital by default policy.
Yeah. Even if you are physically sitting in the office, if you have a meeting, you take it virtually on your laptop.
It's a brilliant way to ensure parity. We've all been in that meeting where the people in the conference room dominate the conversation and the remote attendees are just struggling to get a word in.
They're just tiny floating heads on a TV screen.
Yeah. Shopify's policy ensures everyone is on the same playing field.
But what about when someone does need a specific physical accommodation, like an ergonomic chair or something? How do you handle that without the old bureaucratic HR maze?
Companies are streamlining it drastically. EY built a confidential online portal that bypasses the initial manager approval entirely.
Oh, that's smart. Because then you don't have to explain a personal medical issue to your direct boss.
Exactly. And Kaiser Permanente uses a tiered system to fast-track straightforward requests. So you aren't waiting weeks for a committee to approve a $50 keyboard.
That just makes so much sense. And it's not just physical stuff, right? It's tech accessibility, too.
Oh, definitely. IBM builds accessibility testing into every single stage of their software development. They don't just do a final audit at the end.
And Bank of America has that centralized accessibility center of excellence.
Right. It's becoming a core business function.
So looking at all of the universal design, the streamlined request, I have a pointed question. If we make everything universally accessible, doesn't that inherently benefit everyone listening right now?
In what way?
Like working parents managing childcare, or someone with a temporary injury like a sprained ankle. Doesn't this prove that disability inclusion is actually just better business design?
What's fascinating here is that you are absolutely right. Intersectional approaches inevitably benefit everyone.
Yeah.
When you redesign a system for the most marginalized users, you optimize it for the majority. For instance, training managers to focus on outcomes rather than physical presence.
Like Deloitte and Accenture are doing.
Exactly. When you teach managers to evaluate actual output instead of just seeing who leaves the office last, it fixes bad management across the board, not just for disabled employees.
It forces the company to be more efficient and communicative.
Yes, it eradicates lazy proximity-based management.
So what does this all mean? We have unpacked a fascinating accidental experiment. We saw how rigid traditional work structures were the actual disability, not the workers themselves.
The system was broken.
Right. And for you, the listener, whether you're an employee, a manager, or an executive, this data provides the ultimate ammunition. When you face arbitrary return-to-office mandates, you can now defend flexible work as a proven core operational strategy.
Absolutely. But, as we adapt to this new digital reality, it leaves us with a pretty provocative thought to mull over.
Oh, what's that?
Well, with the disabled workforce finding incredible, undeniable success by migrating to the digital realm, what happens to our physical world?
Interesting.
If the most marginalized workers no longer need to commute, will society lose the urgency to invest in physically accessible urban planning?
Like public transit and city infrastructure.
Exactly. Will our digital world become this inclusive utopia while our physical world remains frozen in the past?
Wow, that is a heavy, very real risk.
Huh?
If we don't have to fix the old pipes because we have the new aqueduct, the people still living around the old pipes are just left behind. That is definitely something to think about. We have to make sure our digital progress doesn't become an excuse for physical neglect. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the structures around you, and we'll catch you next time.